If I came to you and I told you that I wanted to make $1 billion, you'd laugh at me. You'd realize that I don't know what goes into it. It's the same thing for strength and muscle and power. You're telling me that you're afraid of looking like a bodybuilder. That's just as comical as me telling you I'm afraid that if I start making money, I'm gonna be a billionaire.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Dr. Pat Davidson, I've been waiting for this one, and doing the prep for this was amazing because you've been around for a while, right?
Yeah.
For a while. And the one thing that really stuck out is it seems like, I'm always going to say that because I'm pulling data from and listening to other podcasts, that you got into all this because two things are going on. You were like delivering fish, which is kind of like a weird thing.
Yep.
But the thing that cracked me up was your introduction into bodybuilding was either watching the news or morning programs. And then after that, you know, the TV shows would come on like Sean Ray or Warrior Co or whatever. And what made me laugh about that is Kiana. Remember Kiana?
Yeah.
Like Kiana Fitness. Like Kiana Fitness was one that was on pretty early in the morning. And that was one that before I would get to Westside to train would be like the last thing that pretty much all of us were going to see before leaving, not because it was educational in any way. She's just a hot, man.
Absolutely.
Super hot. And one of the guys we trained with, Joe McCoy, 181 all-time world record. So he comes in just a little bit late, and Bob Youngs is on. At that time we were doing rolling dumbbell extensions. So we'd already started, and Bob's using like 40 pounds for the rolling dumbbell extensions, where everybody else would be using like 80s, 100s and shit like that. And Joe walks in and says, "What the hell, Bob? I just saw Kiana using more than this," right? And then that became his nickname because everybody in there ends up with a nickname. So for basically the rest of his life, right, he was known as Kiana. And a lot of the guys that are in there, because there was an attrition, right? So there's still people that there was a dude in there named Gritter, right? And I knew he did HVAC work. And at a certain point in time, I needed some HVAC work done on my house. And I asked Louie, I'm like, what the fuck is Gritter's name? I didn't know what his actual real name was, because
That's so much better.
when you have attrition and you have this Kiana as a nickname, and then nobody knows the person for anything other than Kiana, it's hilarious. So I thank you for that.
Bringing that back, yeah.
Completely forgot about that. And especially in that type of culture, there's nicknames going to everybody.
Absolutely.
For whatever type of reason, but they stick. It's like when you have no choice in it.
I mean,
Kiana.
yeah, that's better than any I ever gave anybody, I think. And I gave some pretty good ones, you know, but it's just such a specific reference too.
Yes.
And if you were, you know, around at that time, like,
Yeah. Well, there was earlier, because I remember this from when I was even younger. I don't even know what it was called, but it was these three chicks in leotards in like a triangle, just bending over, hinging, you know, for like a half an hour. And that was like the porn when I was in junior
100%.
high school. And it just progressed into that. Now nobody does any of them anymore.
I know.
So if this was your introduction, actually, I don't even know what your introduction was, because those two things, like the fish thing, and then the stupid shows that were on, and some of them weren't bad.
Yeah.
You know, they were, at least it was showing the sport, you know, which at that time nobody was really doing that, especially on network TV. So how did that end up being your introduction into the training?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm from Cape Cod in Massachusetts, so that's kind of the fish thing. Like, that's a seafood place. Like, it's just the town next to me, Chatham, they've got a bumper sticker that you can get there, and it says a quaint drinking village with a fishing problem. So like, that's just kind of the way that place is. And like today is like Cape Cod every day. I feel like weather wise, it's
Mhm.
just like cold, like raw to your bones. Like it's always like the next day is somehow grayer and more damp than the previous day.
Yeah.
And, it's just like, it's blue collar for the most part, like year round. And then we have this summer tourism influx that creates this weird divide, like us versus them, locals versus tourists. Um, but we also have this like very strong baseball culture there. You have to get the Cape Cod Baseball League where you get the best college players in the country coming and playing. Each town has a team. The players live with a host family. And as a kid, I was a baseball player and I got to be coached by, the head coach, the assistant coach they would run the camp, and then you'd have like several players also coaching in the camps. And, as like an 11-year-old, 10, 11, 12-year-old, going there in the morning, like riding my bike there and getting coached by D1 All-Americans and elite D1 coaches in baseball, it's an amazing experience. And so it's kind of like go there in the morning, play baseball with these guys. They're like gods,
Mhm.
they really are that in that environment. Then go home after that, and then it's like Sports Center and the fitness shows.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, and I didn't really understand at that time how it was the beginnings of the steroid era in baseball. But the elite players that time, Canseco, McGuire, Bo Jackson, like all these guys are jacked. All these college players are jacked and they're cool as hell. They're the coolest people you ever meet. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Big Oakley shades, chewing tobacco out there, like telling the funniest jokes you ever heard. Like occasionally they just like, hit one 8 miles or something like that. And as a 10-year-old, you're just like, oh my God. So the recipe seemed pretty simple. Like I wanted to be a pro baseball player. I saw these guys that were going to be pro baseball players. Then I would go home, see Sports Center, and then see the workout shows. And the pro baseball players kind of looked like, Sean Ray and Boyer Coe coming on right after them. And then you sprinkle in Kiana and some of the other elite females, and that keeps your attention span as a 12-year-old for quite a while. And I think just also sort of the juxtaposition in some ways in the wintertime too of like Massachusetts and raw, cold, kind of miserable, blue collar, working class, and then like Hawaii for all this fitness stuff with these beautiful girls and
Mhm.
like basically wearing nothing, working out on the beach. And it's like, yeah, I'd rather be there doing that and, playing pro ball or something like that. So I really did get into fitness to be as good at baseball as I possibly could be. That's all I cared about. I didn't give a shit about school at that point. I didn't care about anything. And it's funny, like even then I was going to the library trying to find training information. Nobody lifted weights in my high school. Nobody lifted weights at that time where I grew up. I was the only kid that like I saved money, built a little home gym in my basement, worked out by myself after school, just tried to do everything I saw on those body shaping and other things to work out because that seemed to be the recipe. I started to read about plyometrics and I would take my backpack and tie the TV cable around my waist and pull it with some weights on the fields in the wintertime. And I'd set up the trash cans on the bases in the baseball field during the wintertime, being out in the outfield and try to throw the ball into the trash cans. I saw that on the
Mhm.
Tom Mansky
Yeah.
baseball drills commercials on ESPN. Throw the ball against the dugout, have it bounce back, take about 500 ground balls every day, hit off the tee. I remember hearing Tony Gwynn used to hit opposite field all the way to full pole line and had hit, however many balls in each direction around the field. So I'd do the same thing, and then I'd collect the balls in the outfield, throw them into the trash cans. Uh, you know, so and I was by myself. Like I was kind of a weird kid, probably still a weird person now, but I always liked that experience. Like I always felt like if I just put my mind to something and just did that by myself relentlessly, like there was no stopping how far I could go. And I think that, I certainly didn't end up as a pro baseball player. I wasn't that far away, but there's a big
Yeah.
gap
Oh,
there,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And, but I took that mindset into pretty much everything else. And then, by the time I was in the fishing thing, I had, I'd kind of failed out of college my first go around. Like baseball wasn't working out. I got big into drinking and like, everything kind of fell apart. And I found a guy that was local that taught mixed martial arts. And this was, late 90s. So it wasn't like it is today with official facilities and stuff like that. He was teaching it in his basement. And, he was I was friends with his brother, and like by friends, I mean like we just drank till we were blacked out every day together. And so I remember asking him like, "Hey, your brother teaches some kind of crazy martial art thing or something, right?" Like, he's like, "Yeah, him and his guys are, they're elite. They're some serious dudes." And I was like, "I gotta do that, man. I gotta get out of whatever it is this is that we're doing. I gotta get in with them." And the brother that taught MMA kind of he put me through the ringer to check to see if I was actually going to be mentally tough enough to jump in with him. But he saw that I was, and he brought me in, and like he kind of got me kick-started again in life.
Where do you think that mental discipline was anchored? Because obviously
Yeah.
it's before this baseball thing.
Yep. Well, I first kind of grew up with my grandparents, and they were, you know, uh, second generation Irish in the Boston area. My grandfather, he was the oldest of six, I believe, and his father had polio, so he had to be the man of the house starting at like 10 years old. And he was working hard jobs, longshoreman on the docks in Boston, 11, 12 years old with grown men still, put himself through school, believed in education. He was a tough old bastard. And my grandmother was also like always relentlessly working, cleaning, doing something. And I think that they were disciplined people. They like my mother was a complete train wreck, like total mess, drug addict, alcoholic, completely unfit parent. So, I bounced back and forth between them a little bit. So I experienced like the total discipline of my grandparents, and then I experienced the complete neglect of my mother and like that difference. And I think that even now, like I am almost insanely like pathologically against that slacking lack of discipline. Like it makes me sort of sick to my stomach. And I think that it's like that relationship as a kid with that very extreme
Yeah.
spectrum of parent experiences.
So what helped you make the decision to go to college?
Well, I think I was always just gifted in school. Like I was very low on the effort front. But
But
like
high on the grade front?
I was okay, like way better than I should have been. And I didn't take it seriously. Like I really didn't want to be good at school, but I just was, it was like, and then, when I got to college, like I first was in a history program, and I liked my history teachers in high school. They were like kind of the sports guys, and they taught the history, and they just seemed like real men. And so I kind of naturally like that was the only thing I knew. Like, okay, I like these guys. I kind of want to be like them. I think I'll teach history and maybe coach football and baseball at a high school level. That seems pretty good. And that was the trajectory I was on. When I graduated with the history degree, there was a hiring freeze in Massachusetts. So that's when I actually got into the fish delivery stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucked, but I was still doing mixed martial arts. And my coach was like, dude, like you are relentless when it comes to training. You're focused on your diet to make weight. Like you should look into fitness. And it was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So I went back to school and I got into a strength and conditioning program at Bridgewater State in Massachusetts.
When did the MMA come in?
So I initially kind of failed out of college my
Yeah.
first attempt, came back, was just a complete like alcoholic back at home, like train wreck. By the time I was like, 19 in that ballpark, like I started getting into the mixed martial arts. And like, I got back into community college, did 2 years there. And that's where it was like, I finally focused on studying for the first time. like I kind of put a methodology together, and it was with like classes on videotapes too. But I would be able to sit down, watch the video, and I could transcribe it, and I could rewind it if I missed anything. And I just actually adopted that method of like, this is how I'm going to learn things: videotapes and a notebook, and I'll literally write out every single word for word. And, it's kind of funny because my, I'm doing the college thing. I'm still training,
Why'd you go back? Because it's, my story is a little bit similar, but
Yeah.
where I barely graduated high school, so I had to go.
Mhm.
I still don't know why I went to college except pressure to go.
Yeah.
And so my first year was at a university, basically taking the courses I should have taken in high school.
Mm.
Algebra, I took business
Yep.
math, biology, I took rock science in high school. I mean, I
Yep.
took everything that I could take that I could just get through and still be able to play sports. But after 1 year of success of taking courses that were probably 10th grade level,
Mhm.
like I can go to a bigger university. Boom, wow,
Mhm.
I flunk out of that. And I now know why, it's when they give you a syllabus and it says test day here, test day here. I'm like, fuck, I only need to go on those days.
Yeah.
I'll just read the shit beforehand. Didn't work, by the way,
Mhm.
Flunked out. But the catalyst for me going back was an old coach that I had that was a wrestling coach that basically just said, look, I always thought I was stupid because I was in learning disability courses and you're
Mhm.
kind of tracked like that. And just figured this isn't for me. And he said, you're not stupid. You're just fucking lazy. And I didn't know the answer.
Mhm.
Like I had to go back to figure out what that answer was because I'm not cool if it's just me being lazy,
Mhm.
right? That's 100% on me. Now, if I'm just genetically a retard,
Mhm.
then whatever, that's
Yeah.
what it's going to be. What was the catalyst to make you want to go back after? Because I
Yeah.
think you have to miss a semester, right? You flunk out, you got to skip out.
I just didn't actually provide the accurate transcripts. I just kind of hid the stuff that
Yeah.
looked bad, and no college really followed up on that, to tell you the truth. So I
So
didn't.
you just transferred.
Yeah, I didn't play by the rules. I just threw all that stuff out.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Because I was told you can't go anywhere and I just believed it.
Yeah.
So I had to sit out for whatever. Okay, so there's a learning lesson to anybody that's out there.
Yeah.
Don't always believe what you're
In
told.
the digital age, it might be a little different now. It
Yeah.
might be harder to do that, but back then everything's still kind of on paper.
Yeah.
So nobody knew.
Yeah, but what was your desire to go back?
I think that like my family is just all really smart people. I think it's mostly women. Like, a lot of people died. Like a lot of drugs and alcohol run through there. And, even those people were pretty damn smart, but they just couldn't get their lives together. It's just like, it's a train wreck genetically on that front. Like you're just, under a bridge dead before anybody even knows it. And, but at the same time, it's like everyone had big bookshelves in my family. It was like a very reading focused, literate family, and no trade skills whatsoever. I can barely plug something in the wall, but it was always pushed on me that reading was the most important thing to do. And so that was always a backdrop. It was just expected that I would go to college,
Yeah.
and there wasn't really another thought to it. Like I remember after kind of the first go round, coming back and trying to work some blue collar jobs, and I was just bad at them. Like trying to do landscape construction. I didn't know how to operate the equipment. I remember getting fired and being like confused. I was always good at stuff. And the guy was like, yeah, you're really bad at this. Like you're slow, you're holding up the jobs, like you're terrible. I was like, huh. Yeah, I guess you're right. Like I'm pretty bad. Like, and so it was like, shit, like I'm not even good at this backup plan. And at that point it was kind of like, there's only the one plan now. Like I have to be good at school or I'm totally fucked here. And so it was like, all right, I actually started to learn what effort was. I really kind of, it needs, some things needed to click.
I think you had it because of the baseball, but you just learned to apply it to education.
Yes. Yeah.
Which
100%.
I never did. I just let it focus on the other thing where when I was one of the podcasts I was listening to you on, you became competitive about that.
Yeah,
You know,
very.
which like in my brain, I'm like, why? You know? But, and that was when it was still the history.
Hmm.
Now that being competitive in that, obviously there's a competitive streak,
Hmm.
right? It sounds like you want to avoid being the person that dies under the bridge and being a worthless piece of shit,
Yeah.
you know, which is a good motivator for
Right.
anybody
Right.
that's been around that,
Hmm.
right? It's easy to avoid that, you know, and it's without context, and a lot of people do. But if
Hmm.
you have strong context for that,
Yeah.
it becomes more than just avoiding it.
Hmm.
It's like doubling down.
Yeah.
Now with the MMA, which sounds like it started like mid college, or
Well,
actually right after you've
really,
laid it.
yeah, like I kind of like I'm pretty quick. I can go downhill real fast and I can rebound pretty fast. And I did both of those real quick at like 18, 19.
Yes.
You know, I was still, you know,
I want to talk about sodium for a second. The research shows that optimum sodium levels are about 2 to 3 times higher than the recommended levels. That's where Element comes in. For the past 2 years, I have used Element packs in a multitude of different ways. Each stick has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. There's no sugars, there's no fillers, it's just what your body needs. And it's used by the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team, Navy SEALs, professional sports teams. You'll hear how many people swear by how much Element has made a difference in their ability to not crash, to fight fatigue and cramps, to maintain optimal fluid balance, improve mental focus, help regulate stress, and support deeper sleep. They also just dropped the 12-ounce sparkling can, which is great. It's got 500 milligrams of sodium. Head over to drinkelement.com/table talk and you'll receive a free 8-count sample pack with every order. I've never heard anybody have a bad experience, but if you do, they'll make it right immediately, no questions asked. I want to talk about sodium for a second. The research shows that optimum sodium levels are about 2 to 3 times higher than the recommended levels. That's where Element comes in. For the past 2 years, I have used Element packs in a multitude of different ways. Each stick has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. There's no sugars, there's no fillers, it's just what your body needs. And it's used by the U.S. Olympic weightlifting team, Navy SEALs, professional sports teams. You'll hear how many people swear by how much Element has made a difference in their ability to not crash, to fight fatigue and cramps, to maintain optimal fluid balance, improve mental focus, help regulate stress, and support deeper sleep. They also just dropped the 12-ounce sparkling can, which is great. It's got 500 milligrams of sodium. Head over to drinkelement.com/table talk and you'll receive a free 8-count sample pack with every order. I've never heard anybody have a bad experience, but if you do, they'll make it right immediately, no questions asked.
like I didn't crash on drugs until I was 23. Like I kind of kept it together just enough in this like cyclic pattern of like kill myself work ethic wise during the week and then just like party so hard that, you know, I'd be in a pool of my own fluids by, you know, Sunday morning, hate myself for it, punish myself again for years. I pulled off 4 years of kind of doing that. And then at 23, I just like went off the deep end with harder drugs and like didn't function whatsoever. You know,
What became the lowest point there?
the last time I went out, I mean, I started, I think I got to a strip club at like noon by myself and, you know, had like a case of beer in the car because I couldn't afford to, you know, to pay for the alcohol and the stripper. So I was going out to the car and drinking a few beers, coming back in. And I was there till, I don't know, maybe 11 at night. And then somebody was like, hey, you want to go to a party that's in another, so I drove, blacked out, got there, was in a kitchen and talking to some girl. And some guy came over and was like, that's my girlfriend. And I just looked at this guy and I go, I fucking hate your face. And he goes, all right, we're going outside and fighting. And so it's turned into this like mayhem that went on for quite a while of me trying to fight like 10 guys and just getting stomped into the ground, but I just wouldn't fucking stop, like it didn't end until I remember the bouncer for the big club that was in that area. He was at this party. He was like a 450-pound dude, and he sat on my chest and looked at me and just said, "It's fucking over." And I said, "All right." Because I realized like this guy can kill me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like he can legitimately kill me. So I got hauled off, spent the night in jail. And I remember waking up the next morning and like kind of banging on the bars, like, "Hey, can somebody let me out of here? I got to go to work." And the guy comes in and he goes, "You going to work? What time do you think it is?" I go, I don't know, 9. He goes, "It's 4 in the afternoon." I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. And so he goes, "All right, we want to get you out of here anyways. Like, you need to go." And so he's like, "But you got to take a breathalyzer before you leave." And I was still over the legal limit. He was like, "Holy shit, dude. Like, how is this even possible?" So I had to spend another like 2 hours there. Anyways, like, by the time I remember getting home at like maybe the next day, wearing all off and just being like a bruise from like, eyebrows to toenails. And like, I couldn't even move, like just bleeding everywhere, bruised everywhere, maybe a couple of cracked ribs. And like, I think I spent like 3 days in bed. And after that, it was just like, I can't do this. Like, I literally can't do this. Like, I think it was my ego talking more than anything. Like, I'm too good for this. And I was able to get into AA, and I really drove that path hard for a while. And as soon as that happened, like it just completely revamped everything, kind of off to the races. And within like 5-6 years, I had a PhD. Like it was really just like I just became obsessive with accomplishing things at that point in time.
So at that pivot point, I mean, a lot of things have to be able to change in your life, right? Because your habits that
Yeah.
were all instilled now have to change. All these things have to change. And you seem like the type of person that would just embrace that big jump
Yeah.
where most people have to kind of like struggle through,
Yeah.
to be able to do that. But was that how it was? Is like you
It was
realize this,
instant.
then it's like, screw all you guys. So the
Mhm.
friend group's gone.
Yep.
All this is gone. I'm just doubling down here. And was that, because you were doing the MMA throughout all this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Was that leaning more into that
Way
or
more.
way more into that?
Yep.
So now taking that even more serious.
Mhm.
And just from that sports side, how did that progress from that point forward?
I think that in some ways it's funny because I used to train so hard with the punishment cycle.
Yes.
Like that self-hate just made me want to kill myself in training. So I don't know that if I necessarily got that much better, but I was so much happier. It was just like I looked forward to it. It was like fun rather than this form of like inflicted punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the relationships I had with the other guys improved at that point in time too. It was
Well,
yeah,
that's kind of weird, right? Because that's
yeah.
a mixed culture, right? Because some of
Mhm.
the guys in there can be doing the same shit that you were doing
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yep.
And then some of the other ones won't. I mean, that's a cool thing about just the gym
Mhm.
environment and these type of small niche type culture environments is you'll have the enablers,
Yep.
right? And then you're going to have the realist. It's kind of like balancing between those.
100%.
And when you have this blast dust type of personality,
Mhm.
it's dicey, man. Because now, tell me if I'm wrong, but now you find yourself listening to the people that were trying to tell you all this shit years prior,
Yeah.
and you're like, fuck you, I'm not going to listen to you. Like, fuck off.
Mhm.
And now they make sense. Which in your head you're like,
I
like,
think they always made sense. I
yeah,
just couldn't stop.
yeah.
It was just like there was something in me that like that cycle was just part of my personality. It was like, just the roller coaster of it. Like, and I still have to watch out for that because I need that adrenaline hit in life, you know? And I've gotten it in different ways. And like some of them have just been kind of like blind spots for me, you know? And, but like, you know, the violence of training and then the kind of violence of the way that I did drugs and drank and, the opposition of those things, you know, the pits to the heights, uh, you know, there's just something about that pulls me in, and I find it somehow. You know, I've imploded my life a couple of times as a person that's sober, you know, like work wise and professionally. But it's almost like that the ability to claw back is almost like what I'm addicted to in some ways.
Well, it's a weird thing because I wrote the under the bar thing so long ago, I can't remember, but you know, as you're writing and you've written a lot, so you'll get this, as you're writing things, you think more, right?
Mm-hmm.
It enables you to be able to process things a little bit. And I realize that I live in this blast dust type of thing. It's either, you know, all fucking in, no matter what it is, good or bad, or it's just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing in the middle,
Right.
which is a big problem,
Mm-hmm.
you know, which then is trying to figure out how do you figure out this thing in the middle.
Right.
And I don't know if I ever have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think what happens as you get older, you just get more and more shit taken away from you. That when you try to go to that extreme, you just end up in the middle.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really know, but it's that realization becomes, it can become powerful though,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when you said you got your PhD in another, you know, 4 or 5 years, when you can focus that, you know, in anything, you know, you can achieve pretty much whatever you want,
Mm-hmm.
but there's cost. I mean, when
Yeah.
you have that much focus on one thing, there's always going to be costs that are associated either by you or the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just any high performance. They talk about it in athletics, but it's anything, man.
Yeah.
It's business. It's whatever it is to be able to kind of figure, but with the strength and conditioning, what was interesting was you didn't, at that time, it matured some, right? Because when I was in college, nobody knew what, you know,
Sure.
they didn't even have a path for it. It was like sport management.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to run a health club, you know, or exercise phys, or athletic training, or all this other shit I didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I ended up going independent studies and putting together a plan, you know, that was on, you know, exercise phys, nutrition, all the communication, all the things that I wanted to have to be a trainer or coach,
Right.
because that's all I really could see. And you thought, if I remember correctly, that an athletic trainer was a strength coach.
Yes.
And you almost,
Yeah.
did you go down that path?
I started in that. Yeah, that's what I started in. I was in athletic training classes.
Yeah.
And
It wasn't when you realized tape and
then
ankles.
I realized it was like mama birding guys on the sideline with the Gatorade bottle and taping ankles. And I was like, oh, this is, but you know, I was at a school where it was Dr. Ellen Robinson, and you know, she was starting a strength. I'm the luckiest son of a bitch sometimes. Like, I was in this athletic training program. There's another professor in the exercise science department who is starting a strength and conditioning master's program that year. And I would always see her at the gym. You know, she had the funny shoes. I was like, oh, is she going bowling or something? And like, sharp, always the sharpest workout stuff. And like, I didn't know that they were Olympic lifting shoes. You know, it's like, I just knew that this woman was different. You know, like the way that she moved was like perfect. The way that she executed everything was on point, like the attention. And I was like, who is this lady? And I think that she probably was watching me train too, because I was training for mixed martial arts. And, you know, even before I started on that, like, you know, my mixed martial arts coach grew up with a guy that went over to Russia and got into kettlebells, and actually was one of the guys that brought Pavel back from Russia and started Dragon's Door. So he came in and taught us all kettlebell stuff. And then one of our guys that was strong as a bull, he was like, hey man, I got all these tapes you should check out. And they're the West Side squat, bench, deadlift tapes. with Louis and the dogs on the covers. And so I watched all these tapes, and like I said, I had this method of learning on VHS from the community college. So I'm trying to watch Louis on these VHS and write down word for word everything that he's saying. And I'm like, hearing like, this guy and his numbers. And then like, I'm like, I can't keep up with whatever I don't even know what he's talking about. Accommodating resistance bands, box, breaking up the eccentric and the concentric and this and that. I'm like, I can't keep up with what this guy's talking about. Percentages, wave load. But I remember completely misinterpreting the squat instructional stuff. And so I tried to do the max effort day the way that the dynamic effort day is being done. And I did it with fucking good mornings. So I did like 8 sets of 2 good mornings with like 95% load or something like that. And then I go to train MMA that night and we're doing this drill, hopping back and forth. And like my whole like spinal erector system is failing. It's collapsing as I'm trying to hop. And eventually I just fall on the ground. And my coach is like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Get up. And I was like, I can't stand up. Like, he's like, what did you do? I was like, I followed this tape that Hale gave me. And like, I don't know if I did it right or something like that. And, but I figured it out and I trained that West Side method, with MMA at that point in time. And like, really, I mean, I am a very attention to detail person. So I like really studied everything that I could that you guys were doing. I remember at that time, the Elite FTS newsletter would come out every Friday. I'd be so pumped to be able to read that every single time. I consumed that information like at a rate that was unbelievable.
Well, what's interesting is those videos, there was like the squat, bench, and deadlift, but then there was like a workout series, which was 2 videos. And
was that the one with the strength coach from the Packers too?
That was a different one.
Okay.
He did that later. That was with Kent Johnson. And this is the first time that I've heard somebody dissect the videos the way that you did, because the way that he put these things together is he would film the entire training session, like no edits, nothing. Right. And, there was a bunch of them, because when he would update it, he just got rid of all the previous versions and then would just go with that new version. So every couple of years we'd have to film another one. And the last few that I was there for, I'm the one that's kind of like running this camera type, with just press play, fucking go. But the final editor, you couldn't have profanity in it. So we had, fucking charts and shit all over the place, don't curse, don't say this. And we'd be like 6 sets into the dynamic work, and all of a sudden somebody would just start losing their shit, talking shit to somebody else. And it's like, it would take 6 months to get one workout, but he wanted to do it so people so they would stop. But this is Louis' mind. I'm tired of people asking me how long the rest periods are supposed to be. I'm just going to film it and then they can see. And I'm like, that's not how people work, man. They want to know. It's like, well, they can just watch. I'm like, it's fucking an hour, man. It's of what it is. Like, they can see the percentages.
Yeah.
Like, no, they can't.
Right.
It's not like the plates say 45% and the bands say whatever percent. And, but you're trying to break that all down based upon the little clip where he's talking like 500 miles a minute. And then it can be talking about the squat, but then the deadlift, and then finally get back to the squat. I mean, it's hard, to be able to navigate all that stuff with that, where what most people were doing was just watching it and then going and doing exactly the same thing, which was a problem. Right. Because I'm trying to explain, no, that was like one workout. That was probably never repeated ever again, in the whole time period, where I can see if you're trying to dissect all that, it's a problem.
And I had done it with other training videos, you know what I mean? Like the kettlebell stuff was kind of where I started, and we had all these videos from Russia that, showed these, it was a lot of rope climbing training and kettlebell to run sorts of things. And, I remember just writing down all these workouts, and I had my notebook and like doing these things out on the field. And, we hung ropes from trees and stuff like that. And doing all these back bends and wall walks on the wall to touch your nose on the mat. And then all of a sudden it was just that to Louis. And it was just such a big difference. And like, I had never heard anybody even use the term percentage before, like it was just such a foreign idea. Like I had never seen powerlifting. I don't think I knew what powerlifting was. Nobody where I grew up did that. It's changed a lot
Mm-hmm.
in the 20 something years, 25 years in that span of time. But, it was like, it was a more scientific thing than I had ever been exposed to.
Well, kind of. And this is where my
Yes.
next
Yeah.
question is going to come in, because you have all this analog real world work, that you're doing and you're seeing results from and all that. Then you get into the academia side, right? And for me, it was weird. It was really weird, because everything that I knew was working, I was being told doesn't. Right. And then everything I was being told supposed to work, and I'm 15, 20 years prior to when you were going through, I know for a fact isn't going to work, so my mind's just like, the fuck, like trying to piece this shit together.
Right.
And in hindsight, when you look back to a lot of that stuff, a lot of it was stupid as fuck. It has no application. It really, I'm at a loss for some of the things that I did, not just at Westside, but prior to Westside and all the other kind of, I guess it built work capacity, whatever. But a lot of it was not really productive, and so when you're navigating those two worlds in real time, how are you putting those pieces together?
Yeah. It was tricky for me because I was in the MMA competing side of things too. And I'm trying to learn real practice for strength and conditioning. Cause I was intent on being a pro or college strength coach at that point in time. And I understood the level of importance that Westside had in that world.
I built Elite FTS in 1998, 27 years ago, with the aim to help educate as many people as I could in strength and conditioning. And the way to do that was to keep all the content complementary. The way that we've been able to do that since day one is by providing the best products possible to help your training program. If you can put the item in a gym bag or load plates on it, we have it, and it will work. Everything from SS yoke bars to American press bars, bands. We also have a strength equipment specialist staff that helps outfit home gyms, sport training centers, colleges that have over 3 decades of experience and also have spent a lot of time working as coaches, so they understand the flow of the weight room and how things actually get done. If you're serious about your training and you want to up your game and support the podcast and all the content that we provide, head over to elitefts.com and use the code TABLETALK at checkout to receive 10% off your orders.
So it was like, okay, I'm gonna really learn this and practice this and do MMA. And it was a hard balance between those two things. And MMA really needs a lot more aerobic stuff than what I was doing.
Yeah.
It was like I was very strong, but I was gas fast. And my coach was like, "You're not doing enough aerobic stuff, you're not running." And I was like, well, this was kind of that era of like train slow, be slow as well. Like the importance of the aerobic system hadn't really driven itself into the strength and conditioning world as much as it should have. So there was kind of that contrast going on. And then, Dr. Robinson at Bridgewater, she was Olympic lifting. And so I was trying to get into that as well and learn, how to compete in weightlifting. And then I tried to read as much as I could. I remember there was the website Dynamic Alico, and they had a great series of articles, and I was trying to read everything from there. I read all of the Russian manuals, Medvedev and Verkhoshansky. I remember getting exposed to super training, reading super training, trying to put it all together. I can't remember. There was another Innosport.net was another one that was really good. There were some
Yeah.
great authors in there.
Verkhoshansky, I think, had a blog.
Yes,
You
and
know,
there
and
was the super training group too,
yeah,
like a Yahoo group.
yes.
And I went through that whole history trying to read that entire thing. So
A lot.
well, I had the benefit of when I got into that strength and conditioning program, I got an office job that kind of paid for the tuition.
Mhm.
But I didn't ever really do the job. I just sat at the computer and read strength and conditioning stuff all day, like, an 8-hour shift. So I would just literally read the whole time, which wasn't great from an office performance standpoint, but I learned a lot of strength and conditioning.
The super training thing originally started as many, many years ago. I guess forums might have been, but they weren't there yet. But it was called an email group, right? So
Mhm.
it's just an email thread.
Yep.
And Dr. Sif had a few thousand people, that would be on this thread. And, he would send out an article or a thought or a journal or whatever it is. Then all of a sudden, everybody's replying to this thread.
Hmm.
I had to create a separate email account just for that because it was insane.
Yeah.
Like one thing would go out, then there would be 500 messages.
Hmm.
But if you could keep up on it,
Yeah.
you could learn a lot, right?
Hmm.
Because somebody would say something, and then one of the people that were in the education side would come out and say why exactly that was bullshit,
Hmm.
and it was,
There was some smart people
they
in
were
there.
really smart that were able to, and there was a lot of people on there that were able to take anecdotal stuff and be able to explain, pros and cons. Like this is stupid, but here's why it is probably working.
Right.
And was super beneficial. But when it went to that Yahoo thing, you lose all that context because you're not seeing the discussion,
Right.
happen in that real time, which was, there's a lot of, oh God, people think the hate now's bad. Oh my God. The hate that would just go through there. And when somebody got piled on, it was like, full boom, man. It was just, and I think Mel would put shit out there sometimes just to do that. So all this stuff that we see now is not new.
Right.
It's completely a different thing. And, but so you're navigating these two worlds, but the one thing that I didn't take into consideration is you're looking at this as the full gamblet of strength and conditioning, not just strength, right? Where that's where people back then were getting really mixed up, because a lot of coaches would say, just get stronger. It takes care of everything.
And I was still in that camp too. Yeah.
But if your skill sucks,
Yeah.
because you don't practice your sport, you're really strong, but you suck, which inherently everybody knew because we all played sports with people that were really strong, but just sucked because they couldn't follow instructions or do what they were supposed to do. And so it's, when you're looking at that full sphere, it changes things because
it's tricky for me to think back then because it's been a long time. But I think that I was in that place of early exposure, thinking I really knew something and being pig-headed. And and so I really was dismissive of like aerobic stuff. And I just thought it was going to be all strength and power, rate of force development, etc. And I'm literally failing at MMA because of a lack of an aerobic system. But like, if ignoring that, like the real world feedback and evidence directly coming back to me that I am too pig-headed to actually accept and pay attention to. And really, it wasn't until I heard Joel Jamieson years later give his breakdown of aerobics and writing Ultimate MMA, where it was like, oh, I was wrong. Like, I really wish I trained this way when I was in mixed martial arts. I probably really held myself back by being a complete stubborn prick.
You think it was an overcorrection because the strength and conditioning wasn't being implemented in a lot of sports? So when a strength coach that has that bias sees those athletes, they are weak.
Yeah.
I mean, not only are they weak from a strength sport standard, which they are really weak from, they're weak from a standard of the competitors that are beating them. Right. So it's that it seems like it was just this overcorrection.
Yeah.
Like they need to get stronger, but they don't need to get stronger. Or they don't need to get stronger at the expense of other abilities.
Yeah. And that at that time too, if you look at the athletes that were dominating in MMA, a lot of it was pride. in Japan. And so there was a lot of drugs in the sport at that time. You had like Mark Coleman just crushing people, Kerr.
They're all
Yeah, like monsters. So again, the visual evidence of the people at the top of the food chain is like, these dudes are jacked out of their minds. It was that ground and pound era of like big jacked wrestlers that just overwhelmed people. And it was like, look, like clearly getting bigger and stronger and being able to physically dominate is the ticket here. And so, I think that now clearly the sport has evolved and it's a completely different place, but it's hard to know how much of it is the testing for PEDs too. You put PEDs back in there, maybe you see the athletes start to look more like Kevin Randleman again. And that explosiveness, and it's so hard to tell because there's so many variables and factors and styles and everything that comes into play. But, I've learned over time just how little I actually know and how little I think everybody kind of knows collectively. And that if I'm not open-minded and like pretty damn skeptical, but also able to just look at what's in front of me and be as like realistic as possible, I'm really fucking up if I don't try to keep that open-minded skepticism and, acknowledging that I'm probably wrong kind of attitude.
I think it's the way I explain it is it's like a meathead bell curve.
Yeah.
Right. Where we all get into it and we realize we don't know shit, so you're watching Kiana and all this other kind of stuff. Right. And you start learning more as you work up this bell curve. And I can now kind of plot where somebody is, just from seeing it so many times.
Sure.
And they get to a certain point where they start learning the bigger words. Right. And that's like halfway up that bell curve. Then they start learning, like physical therapy, and they start they're not really learning, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. You fuck yourself up so much that you need to try to fix
yourself. So they start doing that. So the words become even bigger, right? Their bias becomes even bigger. And then all they're doing is trying to impress everybody else with how smart they are on, how they speak. You can see it, how they speak, you go to a lecture or a seminar and they're trying to impress their peers instead of the people who are actually attending to be able to learn. And then a lot of people just get waxed out, about that time because it matters. But when you start going down the other side, and then it's like, you realize when you're at that one area, and I think everybody goes through this. Like I haven't seen anybody that does. Some people get stuck up here, right? And I call them the gurus, right? And I could put Louis in there. I could put Ken Leisner in there. There's a lot of people you can put in there. Great people to learn from because they're so dug in on their own bias that if you know what that bias is and you can disseminate it into what you want to apply, there's giant value there,
right?
Because they never deviated, right? So they have their base and then they just keep experimenting within that base to find a lot of stuff out, but not everybody's a guru, right? Then you start coming down this other side and you realize this shit ain't working with the people I'm working with because they can't understand what you're doing, so you learn to taper down what you're saying, you go back, and then on the other end of it, you realize I don't know anything. But you traveled this path, so you have all this base, right? The basics are still the basics, and everybody that goes through that's really grounded in the basics, but they can help people so much more because they're not. You can see think of people that you see that are popular now or were popular, and you can plot exactly where they are on this
100%,
curve.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is you don't know you're on it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You don't know, right? Because you legitimately think I know everything there is to know about maximal strength development, right? And then that gets reinforced because people are coming to you for that. Right. And then you run into somebody that is having better success doing something else and you'll dismiss it, and lean into your own bias. But if you stay around long enough, you realize actually there's something to take here, and it's an interesting path.
Yeah.
And you've gone through, that whole bell curve.
That's why I like competing in things, because somebody is going to do something very different than how you think everything should be done. And they're going to kick your ass. And then how do you live with that? You know what I mean? Like, are you just going to say, it's bullshit. It's just like I don't do that. Like if I'm getting my ass kicked by somebody, I want to know what are you doing? You know, there's got to be something to this. You know, competing in strongman was great for me. You know, I was pretty good at it, pretty quick, but I was still getting my ass beat by like a coal miner in Kentucky at the national championship who was like drunk the day before, and it's like, what's this guy doing? You know, like how is he so good at this particular sport? And you know, with me, with all of my, you know, understanding of different periodization forms and blending of, you know, physical therapy into the training and, you know, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's still not working as well as whatever that guy did, you know? Like, so I'm always like willing to try to step way back, like zoom out, the 1,000 mile zoom out, and just think to myself, like, what are the fundamental principles? Not the, like, I try not to be married to exercises or methods or anything. I just try to think, like, what's the farthest back I can get from a principle perspective of what really matters? And then I try to work from there going forward. And, you know, I'm big on just making categories. Like that's probably what I do better than a lot of other people professionally. Is I'm good at like thinking about the biggest of big pictures and then making boxes that I think things live in. And then I operate from those places and just make sure that whatever it is you're doing, I have a roadmap of the right boxes to help you along your way, and that I'm making decisions from like a model perspective rather than from my own kind of emotional place inside my head.
Now, are those boxes motor abilities, or are the boxes the adaptations that you want to derive from that?
Well, I think that you have to understand the motor task, number one. And then you have to appreciate what is the adaptation that would amplify the motor task.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I have, like, when I look at all athletes and movement, like I made something that I call the ground spectrum, and it runs with the lowest ground sports and activities to the highest ground sports and activities. So the lowest ground sports I can think of are springboard diving, platform diving, figure skating, half pipe skateboarding, and snowboarding. Those are on the lowest ground end. The highest ground sports, powerlifting is the highest ground sport. You know, maybe like interior line play and football is another one. And so, what makes each group great at their respective things? The lowest ground athletes are able to turn and tumble through space with high velocity. And then the highest ground athletes are able to not get turned and not get tumbled by the highest external forces possible. So that's the big gap, the big difference point, and everything is a spectrum in between those places. But it's based on the amount of matter that you're interacting with during the sport and during the movement of the sport, where springboard diving is the lowest ground one I can possibly think of. You're interacting with air molecules for the most of the time, and it's your ability to just make your body ball up and roll or corkscrew and spin like that. And interestingly enough, if I take the best athlete in the world from the highest ground sport and I make them try to do the lowest ground sport, they're probably going to die, and vice versa. You know, like really, like I think about powerlifting, and it's your ability to not get turned or tumbled during the task. And if you can micro turning and tumbling, if you can prevent that from happening, you're probably going to make the lift clean. And when there's a breakdown in the lift, there's some kind of turn, some kind of tumble that happens.
Yes.
And so it's like, but this guy doesn't turn and tumble until the forces get higher than these other people do. So there's different adaptations that create a trajectory towards different points on that spectrum. And I think that the thing that would prevent you from getting turned and tumbled, the most obvious thing is getting bigger and stronger, just more mass and more muscle tissue. And then the other one's weird, like what allows you to be able to turn and tumble through space faster. But it's probably your ability to morph your body into positions. Like how tightly can you turn yourself into a ball would determine, like Blanca from Street Fighter or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like the position is the critical thing. Like how much can you turn yourself into a pencil to be able to rotate fast? And so that's more of like a motor learning and joint capability thing. And in some ways they're sort of oppositional. You know, I think about like every classical strength training adaptation, like the first thing that happens neurologically is you learn how to not get turned and tumbled by the weight. That's the motor learning thing is I have to brace. I have to get tight so that I don't lose my axial skeleton one way or another. It shouldn't bend, it shouldn't flex, it shouldn't turn, it shouldn't side bend, nothing. It needs to remain rigid. And then on the other end, it needs to completely move. It has to remain as mobile as possible. If you continue to sort of see the adaptations on the high ground and for, you know, the more muscle tissue that you have, the less you're able to, you know, if something's in the way, you can't move through it. You know, the bigger your lats are, you can't move through them.
Mm-hmm. I just want to take a moment to let you know about our crew. What our crew is, it allows the show to stay independent, and it's the reason why the podcast is still here now. The podcast is free to listen to, but it's not free to produce. It keeps going because of the sales through Elite FTS, our show sponsors, but more importantly, our crew members. The reason I love this is for many reasons, is it keeps the show independent. So I can pick who I want to speak to. I can pick what topics I want to speak to, and I don't have to be accountable to anybody. I just go off what the crew members want and what the audience wants, and I don't have to deal with all the other bullcrap that's associated with the podcast world. In return, what you get with the crew is ad-free episodes that are released a day ahead of time. You get access to our Discord community, which has AMAs, like 60 ebooks. We try to put a new ebook out every single month. Access to our coaching community with form checks, training Q&As. It also gives you invitations to our training retreats that are out here in the gym once or twice a year. 76% of all the people that joined in 2022 are still members now. Right now, you can either go month to month or get 2 months free with an annual plan. Just look for the link in the description, look at the QR code, or search elitefts.com crew and join today. It means a lot.
You know, I think the skeleton actually starts to change shape over time. Like you can look at someone and say, that's someone that strength trains. You know, they have a distinct way that they walk. They have a distinct way that they run. You know, if you saw a team of bodybuilders or powerlifters or wrestlers going out for a jog, you know, they run funny because they can't turn. You know, that's the distinct thing about them. So that's like my biggest zoom out thing possible is it's that distinction that's the biggest point. And then I need to be able to figure out like where do you need to live on this spectrum for the sport that you play.
Well, that becomes interesting because where your bias falls on the spectrum is going to look at the highest ground and say the reason why they're getting hurt, joint damages, all that is because they don't have the abilities to be able to move outside of that plane, right? So then there's the overcorrection of the functional training or whatever you want to call it that's going to go into that population, which may or may not make a difference because now you have to determine what's the optimal level that needs to be there. And then on that other end, the reason why they're underperforming is because they're not strong. They don't know how to brace. They don't know how to do all these other things, you know? So it's a weird world.
I made the same spectrum for exercises, you know, so for like the squat pattern, for instance, you know, the highest ground squats I could think of, hack squat, leg press, you know, and they're things that have external support from the padding and the equipment and there's handles that you can hold on to. And then all the way on the other end, but it's like sequentially, it's almost like, you know, you go from the highest ground and then, and that would involve like a leg exercise where your knees are bending and you're maximally supported. And then the next one down would be the Smith machine, because it doesn't have the same level. It's on tracks, but it doesn't have the body support. Then you get to free weight bars after, then you're moving into your split squats. Then you're moving into like twisting the body. Then you're moving into a lateral stance with a twist. So that's like kind of the full spectrum. And like, depending upon where the athlete sits on the spectrum, you would be picking your squat exercise from that chute, essentially. But I also want you to do it right. So I think that the easiest way to motor learn a squat is with the highest ground one. And then let's say your terminal exercises are way over here. I'm going to gradually strip away ground and keep you competent until you get over here. And then you'll probably do 80% of your volume here, but I still need the physiological stimulus of the highest ground stuff too. Like, I don't know exactly what adaptation takes place over here. It's motor learning. It's sort of like positional strength that I think is important, but the degree of actual structural adaptation, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. It hasn't been studied. Like, this is just my way of rationalizing the existence of things and trying to put everything into a place. Like, again, I don't want to be married to a system. I just want to know everything that's available and then potentially make a decision that's rational as opposed to emotional. I think emotions are what gets me into trouble and most people into trouble. And so if I can create an objective system, I always operate with that. And I try to really never make decisions off the top of my head.
Well, that's interesting to me, because if we look at the example that you gave with the hack squat being the highest ground, and we'll use a power lifter and a squat as an example. It's what I know the best, right? So you can take that power lifter with the squat, and then somebody may show them a split squat and they absolutely suck at the split squat.
Yep.
And then they're going to come and say, well, see how bad you are at this. This is a weak point. This is, what's holding everything back.
Right.
Where if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, the best way to attack that would actually be a longer progressive model, going from that highest ground where you're at with the squat, which is like 3 removed, right in there, and then going from that into the next grounded thing, right? To where that split squat may actually be 3 more exercises removed.
Correct.
And of course you're going to suck at it, right? Where you could, if you went here, to
split squat,
single leg
Smith
squat,
or something.
Supported or something like that, or single leg fucking leg press, then move it gradually down. The adaptations that because to me, it all comes down to the adaptation.
Completely.
Right. Exercise is removed. We're looking for a certain adaptation.
Yep.
That adaptation's going to still be what you're looking for. It's just the movement's going to be better set in your hierarchy. And it would work in the inverse.
Exactly.
Right? To where they don't have to go and do the squat, right? Like the too far removed. Put them at the easier one, the most grounded.
Right.
Oh, actually, no, it'd be the opposite, when they have to work the opposite direction.
Well, I always just go from most ground to least ground.
If
from a motor learning progression standpoint. You know, and if your sport is pure motor learning and coordination, well, then we need to get you way over to that low ground area. Because I look at diving and I'm like, that's a coordination sport. Timing and coordination is what dominates over there, assuming that you have the prerequisite range of motion to get into the positions. And other, like skateboarding, very similar. It's a coordination and timing sport to be able to go up in the air, revolve around, and land on this, crazy implement with wheels on it. So I need to be able to potentially strengthen some tissues that are coordination dominant tissues. And to me, those are the frontal plane and the transverse plane tissues. So I need to make a squat that primarily targets the adductor magnus, as opposed to one that's going to be quadriceps dominant or glute dominant. And, I've got a whole system where it's like evaluating the center of mass and seeing your center of mass shift over a leg and what needs to happen to the pelvis and the thorax to demonstrate that you're actually lateralized. And now that you are, like, the adductor magnus and the glute med are going to light up. And if you can hold that and now project yourself up and down through space in a squat. Well, now we're targeting the frontal plane muscles, which should allow you to be able to hold integrity of a position and produce more force from that place. And like just a lot of sports, they're not center of mass in between the base of support producing force from there. It's center of mass lateralizing over one base of support and producing force from there. A basketball crossover dribble, baseball with a pitcher going from one base of support to the other. Most things feature this lateral shift. And I don't think that there's a lot of strength training exercises that people have become familiar with that actually put you into that place and strengthen some of those tissues as the targets. It's always squat is just bang here, or even a split squat is just this center of mass between the 2 feet, as opposed to the manipulation of the center of mass and then the turning of the center of mass to be able to then get after some transverse tissues. And it's like, it's hard because it's like saying it's one thing, but then demoing it and having people feel it is another thing. And every time I show this and teach this, people are like, yeah, I've never been exposed to this. This doesn't exist in my head. I have no place for it. But it's like, it's a thing. You see it in sports, and I can take a basketball game and frame by frame show you when the athlete comes over here and like, here's where their femur stays. Here's where their body is relative to it. This is what their foot doing. We need to in some way recreate this so that they can hold the position more effectively and produce more force from this place. But I'm not going to recreate basketball in the gym. I'm going to do it with my traditional gym exercises of, we're going to get into this position in squat, we're going to get into this position in hinge, and it will, if I measure your range of motion after, you should see more transverse range of motion in the femur, in the thorax, and the person should be progressively getting stronger with those tissues in it too.
So have you found, because with any movement, there's going to be progressive strength within and above what range of motion that you're working in. Easiest way to explain would be an isometric. It's going to strengthen 10, 15% higher or lower of what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about this, hip position or core position relative to the force, right? This going from here to here, let's say it's 3 inches, right? What is the range that's going to strengthen in, that's going to have that correspondence? Because the follow-up to that would be, is it necessary in the first place if the main range, you get what I'm saying?
Totally understand what you're saying.
So it's the question would be, because you do this, right? And then you see the progress that's being made from that. To reframe it, when you're in this side range, we'll just call that, does it have correspondence to the main range?
I think that's a question that nobody has an answer to.
Well, it's tough, right?
Yeah. Well, I just don't think anybody knows
at
this point in time, because there's not enough exposure to the kinds of drills that I'm talking about for people to have a frame of reference. And so there's not enough data, like I don't see too many. I know some strength coaches in professional sports that understand, that do some of this stuff, and they've got their data that they hold inside their organizations. So I don't know what that looks like. There's no researchers that understand this stuff. It's too limited right now in terms of people that understand the training methods to be able to have any statement about the efficacy of it, or how far of a carryover, or how close you need to be to the bullseye for it to be effective from an execution standpoint. I tried to create a system that would tell you if you're competent or not with it. And it's all based on center of mass positioning and what it should look like and feel like. Now, I went down the rabbit holes of all rabbit holes to put this together, where I did this comparative evolutionary anatomy of human versus chimp anatomy. And essentially looking at the evolutionary history of movement over time. And so if we look at movement over time, first life organisms on the planet, all they can do is compress and expand. They, like an amoeba, like it squishes itself over here, it projects itself over here. And we still have parts of our body that work that way, like our lungs and our hearts. You never get to throw out anything from evolution. It always continues on. Let's fast forward to animals, animals that actually have a spine. The first of those are fish. And so a fish has a frontal plane spinal engine. It swims in the frontal plane. We take that and we bring it to land, and we generally have reptiles, and they're still using a frontal plane engine to be able to move through space. Stay long enough, and we get to mammals, and mammals adopt a new spinal engine, which is a sagittal engine. Okay. And some mammals go back into the water, like whales and dolphins, and they're essentially sagittal in the water. They're running in the water versus like a snake is swimming on the land. Go forward again, and we ultimately get to humans that are using a transverse upright system. Only creature that uses a transverse system. So, interestingly, if you look at the way evolutionary progress works, anytime an animal is confronted with a level of stress that it can't tolerate, it always drops backwards in the timeline of evolution and adopts an older model. So if we look at chimpanzees, when they try to go on two legs and walk forward or run, they can't deal with the stress of bipedal locomotion against gravity. So they lose their mammalian sagittal spinal strategy, and they have to adopt a frontal fish strategy to try to cope. Okay. And so it's always understanding the timeline and then what's the next step backwards, and to understand, like, now it's like a human being. When they don't move well, it's the same thing. Okay, you see them kind of sway back and forth like a chimp or a penguin when they're trying to move through space. It's the lack of fluidity is expressed in a frontal plane compensation, because you are searching. First you can go to a sagittal style, which is basically like put a walker in front of them and they're a quadruped sagittal spinal mammal again. And if I take that away from them, they're unable to even use a sagittal style, and they have to rock back and forth sideways. So if I understand the trajectories of chimp anatomy development, and I understand the trajectory of humanoid anatomy development, I can see the differences. And it's largely based on the sagittal plane center of mass. Okay, where a chimp is basically a four-legged animal, and it's got a long, flat spine that's gently kyphotic the whole way, but generally flat. Even the back of its head is flat. Versus a human, where it's an alternating series of lordotic and kyphotic curves in the sagittal plane. Like the occiput goes out kyphotic, the cervical spine comes in lordotic, thoracic is kyphotic, lumbar is lordotic, sacrum is kyphotic, glute ham tie-in is lordotic, hamstrings are kyphotic, popliteal space is lordotic, calves are kyphotic, Achilles is lordotic, calcaneus is kyphotic, arch of the foot is lordotic, ball of the foot is kyphotic, proximal toe is lordotic, distal toe is kyphotic. It's like, boom, boom, boom. As soon as you lose that and it flattens, you're generally experiencing a situation where your center of mass gets pushed forward in space, and you have to compensate for that in some way, shape, or form. And with that compensation, you lose the fluidity to be able to turn and use a transverse style to deal with stress. And you adopt more and more and more of a chimpanzee-like approach to dealing with gravity and dealing with movement. So if I know the primary differences, I can begin to move you back towards this human style if I have to restore motion capabilities and motor learning potential of being able to grasp more task, basically competency, for you to be able to perform exercises of different kinds. But I am always following this high ground to low ground motor learning approach, regardless of the kind of motor task that I have to teach you.
Well, if I strip this correspondence issue question into just common sense, I mean, let's just go with something that's kind of basic that everybody that would know that's in the strength world is the good morning to a squat is Mel Siff would phrase that as it's chaos training.
Mm.
You know, you're going to do the good mornings to avoid or recover for when you start to pitch forward in a squat, right? So that good morning, while it's different than what we're talking about, it kind of is still the same, right? Because we're moving that plane, you know, to be out of where that core capability is, to be able to have correspondence to that core capability, right? Everybody knows that you build up that lower back. You build up the ability to not fall forward.
Yeah.
However that's going to be. Good morning, better bracing, better, the whole host of different shit, right? But we all know those things do correspond back to what that is, and might be, you know, at the higher levels, the only way you're going to be able to get that main thing to actually move anymore, you know, because of all the other genetic factors and so forth that have led to wherever this sticking point kind of is.
Yeah.
Right. To where I've always said sticking points are mental, physical, or technical. And you can, you know, Dwayne Jackson's biosocial model in the most retarded way you can actually explain it, you know, it kind of falls into that. And the physical aspect, I think we're not even talking about that. We're talking more of a technical aspect with the way that you're seeing this.
Yeah.
Right. Because everybody wants the physical answer.
Right.
My lockout sucks. What exercise should I do? And you're like, oh my God, you know, it's not that, you know, it's going to be all these other different variables that play into that. But the exercise is going to be dependent upon more, in the way I see it, not breaking pattern.
Yeah. You know, to me, it's like people can be upright in a lot of different ways. And so just looking at someone and seeing that they're upright, I don't know how you got there. Okay. You could have got there through compensatory jujitsu where it's like 10 steps. Like, generally speaking, I think we can all look at someone move and you can tell when someone is a fluid athlete versus like, yikes, what's going on over here? And I'm in yikes category. Like, you know, I look at when I'm sitting down, my legs are, you know, splayed out. I'm on the outside edges of my feet. Like I basically have chimpanzee legs, you know, like they're really good for putting on the sides of a tree and climbing up it. But like, you know, they're compensatorily ER'd and abducted, you know, and it's like, it's where my system had to go to be able to deal with the level of stress that I bombed it with. Okay. And generally speaking, it's like the first order of business is that like my axial skeleton is just pushed really far forward. You know, the pelvis is shoved forward, the thorax, the head, whatever it is. And, you know, if I wanted to fix this, and I don't really have to for my goals, you know, my goals are at this point bodybuilding and running fast and jumping and stuff like that. You can be deep into bad compensatory movement and do that stuff just fine. Okay. Similar with powerlifting. It's almost like if you're really fluid and graceful and athletic, you're probably not a great powerlifter, you know? So the question is always like, well, do you need to? Like, I'm not saying everybody needs to do this, but if all of a sudden, like, let's say I wanted to really focus on golf, I need to make some adjustments here. Like I'm screwed. Yeah. Like, you know, by increasing my squat, you know, another 20 pounds, I might be worse at golf as a result of doing that. Like I need to find a way to bring my mass backwards, you know, and a lot of that is going to be based on, you know, muscles that pull the pelvis back a little bit more. So hamstrings primarily, the respiratory system being able to pull even the guts and the organs and the spine back more. It's just like the forward drive of things is where you create your force from. You know, it's where you create your linear projections from. It's how we go up. It's how we go forward. It's how you lift things in those directions really forcefully. But it's got a cost. You know, it's the cost of doing business. Like you adapt and you become more efficient at being able to do those things, but you lose your ability to do some other stuff. And the more that you drive the train down linear force production, probably the more that you're going to lose some of your ability to rotate all of your bones through space. And it's that ability to retain rotation that leads to fluid movement and the ability to kind of be a jack of all trades in some ways. And so it's a rabbit hole to get into, But again, this is why I try to create these spectrums and to have people understand, like, if you want to be great at high ground stuff, you probably shouldn't be a great rotator.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to be unbelievable over here, you have to be a great rotator. And you probably don't need to be exceptional at preventing rotation and tumbling over here. Like, how strong do you have to be to win the gold medal at half pipe skateboarding?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not very strong. Like, if we took that individual and we made them a 4-plate, barbell squat or ass to grass, I don't think it would improve their standing in the skateboard world. Maybe, I mean, as long as they retained all of those abilities, if they could somehow gain that without robbing Peter to pay Paul, but it's unlikely.
So when we're speaking about these boxes and these movements, then the real application comes to when you start to put this into a training program.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So these seem like they become the pillars.
Yeah.
Okay. So with the powerlifter, it's a squat, bench, deadlift. Those are the pillars.
Yep.
What we're talking about here, these movements become those pillars.
Mm-hmm.
So you have those movements placed throughout the training plan, the training week, however it's laid out.
Yep.
But it's just one movement, right? How do you build the rest of that training day to not destroy what you just tried to build? Because
Sure.
you can put that one movement in there, but then put in 3 or 4 other movements which just reinforce the shit that you don't want reinforced.
Right. I think you always have to know what are your KPIs, and so if I've got a rotational athlete and I have an idea of how much, like, I usually just measure arms and legs for table tests for range of motion, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, IR, ER, and that gives me a really good window into what's going on with the body. Like, I know if you're clean with all those movements, your thorax is in a good position, it can move. Your pelvis is in a good position, it can move. If I see that your arms and your legs can't move, or like you got a ton of ER but no IR, I need to attack it through the pelvis and the thorax. Like, trying to work on the legs to fix it's not a leg prop. The legs are a good analysis tool to see a pelvic and thoracic problem, but solving it through the legs is the wrong fix. It's the body, it's the mainframe that needs to be worked on and given motion capabilities. So I have to, like, different sports are going to have different KPIs.
Sure.
Okay. Like,
Yeah.
powerlifting, it's pretty simple. Okay.
Mhm.
It's your squat, bench, and you're dead. The sport is the training in some ways. Distance running, it's similar. But like the weight room for a baseball player, like, what's important? Like, how the hell do you know? So certainly, like, every sport, the gravitational element is huge. Okay. Like, and that's why sagittal compounds are going to be a foundational piece of every training program, because you always have to deal with gravity. And it's a hell of a force, really, when you get down to it. Even sprinting, like, the primary thing that you're dealing with is gravity. If you're trying to hit a tennis ball, it's still the direct down gravity. So you need to be strong enough sagittally against gravity. But some of my KPIs for a tennis player or a baseball player are probably going to be table tests. So I can't bring you down to a level of loss of motion by bringing your strength up too high. So it's like, there's always that question, what's strong enough? Strong enough is whatever doesn't rob the other KPIs. If I'm robbing the other KPIs, okay, I either have to hold or back off on the volume in this element so that I don't have Mount Everest and then the Marianas Trench. So, there's clearly the other thing. You have to have your anaerobic capacity, aerobic capacity, rate of force development, and speed-based tests. But I think that you've got to have an awareness of what is the acceptable range of motion for the joints and I use table tests because I think they're the most predictable and the easiest to interpret. Like, all of these other movement screens, I think, are garbage. There's too much subjective evaluation. Like, I don't have a clear number that I'm working with.
Well, coordination's also involved.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if I just put you on a table and I have an idea about, your hip flexion and all those kinds of things, and I see that, like, hey, you just, you went through this hard training cycle for 12 weeks and we just took away, 10 degrees of hip IR. Okay, we gotta let you recover from that and see what happens to your IR in your deload kinds of time period. See if it recaptures. And if it does, maybe we can push your physiology a little farther with some of the output metrics. But when those output metrics encroach on your movement capabilities, now I think we have to be aware of that and not push too far into those physiological output pieces.
All right. So this will be fun because it's the strength and conditioning world is powerlifting was first, but the strength and conditioning world is what like really sucked me in because there's with the athletes that we're speaking about, there's so many different motor abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Let's exclude powerlifting for a minute and just take the strength force out.
Yeah.
There's so many different motor abilities. It's like, what the fuck? Like there's a lot of shit going on, along with the technical skill, which is the most important of all of it that plays into that. The easiest of all, in my opinion, is the bodybuilding. Right? From the training perspective,
Yeah.
just the training, exclude diet, PDs, take all that away. You got this, so, which is interesting, right? Because now I'm going to sound like I'm on the top of that bell curve. Like if you really kind of know what's going on, this is the easiest shit in the world. It really is, but people will make it super complex and all this other kind of bullshit that plays along with that. Where I want to go is when you look at your education and expertise in the strength and conditioning world, what realistically could or should be applied to those that are just training to get jacked?
Well, I think that it's high ground choices. Like you don't ever need to go down the ground spectrum in bodybuilding. And I think that all of your higher ground pieces are almost always going to be the right choice because you're going to be able to drive force into the target muscle to a greater degree every single time. If you're looking to grow quads, there's almost no better pick than the hack squat.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a moment because we do read the comments, and one of them that keeps popping up more frequently than not is I can't believe this video doesn't get more views. Take a minute to subscribe, leave a comment, and share. It really does help.
Like it's almost like try to hack squat and not have your quads work. Like it's even if like someone's completely clueless, never done it before, and you show them the picture on the side of the machine, I think that they're going to approximate that to some degree, and they're probably going to get some quad. And if they do a few sets and get some reps, the next day quads are probably going to be sore. So from a probability standpoint, because bodybuilding and aesthetics is about like you got to grow all the tissues. That's the idea here. And if you've got some missing ones, you're going to look kind of funny. And there's a lot of ways that someone can get the job done with a bar. Like the way that they get it up and down, I don't know how the hell. Like I've heard the craziest things from working with clients that are bad at exercise of like, hey, what did you feel on that set? They're like, literally with like bench press, they're like, yeah, I feel all this stuff in my upper back, and I'm like how are you feeling your traps when you're bench pressing? Like I can't even envision this, but like, yeah, the main thing I feel is my traps. It's like, what the fuck, man? Like, but if I put them on a machine, they feel the right thing. So, but I do think that we have an idea of a mechanical profile at this point for what seems to grow tissues the best. And it's when the tissue is stretched is when you're putting more force on it. So, I typically don't do things that would use like bands or chains for hypertrophy because I want it heavier or more torque when you're in a stretch position. And, most of your classic free weight staples, they do that, like a squat, a hinge, and a press. They all feature, the moment arms of the joints going into higher torque positions as the muscle is getting stretched. Versus a lot of back training doesn't do that. Like free weight back training is a higher torque point when the muscle is short. Like the elbow is more displaced from the shoulder at the top of a row and at the top of a pull-up than it is at the bottom. So a lot of times I need to use machines or cables for back training to be able to really get that stretch, high stress, high torque position. But most of your training, I think, like, Jordan Peters is maybe the strongest bodybuilder in the world. He's an absolute monster. He only uses machines. I think he maybe stiff leg deadlifts with a barbell, but that's the only free weight exercise I've ever seen the guy do in training. And I mean, he is so strong, it's freaky. But it's like, I think that for the most part, you're trying to target something and driving as much force into it as possible. You probably want to stabilize every part of your body as much as you can with external support. And then you want something that's on a pathway that you can push with the prime mover as hard as possible.
Is periodization even necessary?
It's not necessary, but I think that it probably balances stress across the year better. And like at least the way I do periodization is it's a dietary based periodization. Like if I'm in a maintenance diet, I'm at maintenance volume. And if I'm in a deficit or a surplus, then it's a ascending volume based, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, something like that. But that's the reasonable application of periodization for aesthetics is it's got to correspond with the dietary phase you're in.
I had a
yeah.
Sorry, that was loud. I have a question. But when you're training like more bodybuilding type style and using like cables and everything, at least in my experience, you tend to feel like a pump more. Like the pump is just like absolutely crazy. But if you're doing other stuff more kind of like this squat, bench, and deadlift type, more like strength stuff, I have not really felt as much of a pump. Is that just the difference? Like how you said you were kind of like in the lengthened position, targeting the muscle more, kind of like building parts of your body, as opposed to strength is more kind of like using more muscles of the body and less targeted. That was just something I was curious about.
I mean, it's very individual, I think, at that point. Like it could be a difference in rep ranges for you. It could be, I know, like, I'm in contest prep right now. It's very hard for me to get a pump no matter what I'm doing. Like, it's just, I don't have the raw material to be able to do it. But like, if I'm in the height of the off season with like some kind of 8,000 calorie a day for weeks on end diet, like I can walk down the road and have a pump. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's so many different pieces to it. Like, to me, the way I look at the pump is it's a good signal that everything in your lifestyle is set up to grow tissue. Like it's not the goal of the training session, but it's a good indicator that sleep is on target, nutrition is on target, and drugs are on target if that's a factor. But from there, it's almost like, so I always hear people say like, oh, it's always high rep sets that give a better pump. Not for everybody. Like I oftentimes get a better pump from lower rep heavy stuff than the high rep stuff. I sometimes don't get any kind of pump from at all. But I think that could be your fiber type profile, or it could be a lot of things. So it's always hard to give a yes or a no kind of an answer to that one.
So it's a weird one because I come from the strength world. So to me, the pump was to be avoided at all costs.
Right.
It's like, no, you don't want to do that. But when I started training with Meadows, that was one of the biggest, when we'd fuck with each other. Like you'd say, yeah, you're pumped. I'm like, do not ever ask me that again. That's gay as shit that anybody's ever said. Like you don't, you're in the strength world, you're not going to be able to say that.
Yeah.
But when people will ask me about that, I think it's a good end. People will debate its effects on hypertrophy, whatever. I don't really give a shit. It will let that person know if you're training the pecs and your triceps are getting pumped, then you probably need to change your technique a little bit to be able to focus on the pecs. It's a good indicator. I didn't think of what you said though. It's also a good indicator to be able to know if all those other things are systemically on point. Because if you are dieting down and you are lean, the shit kind of like goes away.
I notice it with my track and athletic stuff, like trying to do that stuff in a surplus, like the low back pump just gets outrageous, or like my quads or my calves just pump out. It's like I can't do the running because I'm too pumped from it, because I try to I have the same warm up, the same everything, the same sequence, And it's like, I know I'm in trouble if during the warm up, I'm starting to like low back pump out or quad pump out. And I'm like, it's going to be a long day, man. I don't know about this. Versus now, it's like, it never happens, you know?
Okay. Now staying still on this hypertrophy bodybuilding thing,
Yeah.
not the strength thing. I want to make sure we're clear on that,
Yep.
because the strength thing is, you know, developing these adaptations over a period of time. So the same movement kind of needs to kind of stay in to be able to build those adaptations.
Change much ever.
Yeah. When this is in the strength right now in the hypertrophy
Well,
world.
for hypertrophy.
Okay. Well, in the hypertrophy world, there's two schools of thought that kind of trend through. You know, the one is you need to run the movement until you can't progress on the movement, then change the movement. And then the other one is, as long as you're targeting that muscle and you're feeling it in that muscle, you can change the movement every single time that you go in the gym.
Yep.
In the real world, that's how most bodybuilders train.
Yep.
Right. But in the science-based community, that's 100% wrong, but it's how the minority of the people train.
Right.
You know, so where do your thoughts kind of fall on that?
So I think that people don't recognize how much motor learning takes place with changing exercises. You know, you go from a bar to dumbbells, like you're going to make huge progress week to week in the first few weeks of going to dumbbells because you're motor learning the dumbbells. You know, I want to know if I'm making progress, that it's actual tissue progress. And I think that I am ensuring that by keeping the same exercise. So if that exercise actually starts going up, I'm pretty sure that what I'm doing is growing muscle tissue. You know, if it's staying the same, nothing's happening. If it's going down, it's an indicator that I'm probably losing muscle tissue, or at least losing some of the pressures from having that, you know, the fullness of being, you know, bench press. Like, it always falls off the cliff for me when body weight goes down, and every other exercise could be going up. But bench press just is telling me, like, I can't pressurize the body and hold the, you know, the fluid in the right places anymore. But yeah, I look at, it's the weights in the weight room. It is the training stimulus, but it's also my indicator of what's happening for body composition for me. Like, the best indicator of muscle gain is the bathroom scale and the weight room performance. But I need to keep the weight room performance the same exercises. Otherwise, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Well, this also has application when you're dealing with the strength sport world, because sometimes they'll put movements in and then make great progress in the movement in the first 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
But they're just learning how to do the movement.
Yeah. It's all neurological.
You know, so they're not gaining as much strength as what they think they are because they put that one thing in there.
I mean, I notice it even if I go to a different gym and use a different hack squat or something like that. It's like day one compared to the day two is like drastically different. I'm much better the second time because I kind of figured the thing out. Like, it has its own weird idiosyncrasies that I didn't know about. And now it's like, you know, familiar with it, and performance goes up. I didn't gain quadricep tissue in that time period, but I know if I'm in a 16-week surplus push and I'm using the same piece and I added, you know, a plate to each side on the hack, yeah, I'm pretty sure I grew some stuff.
So with your history being, you know, the MMA, then the strongman, and then kind of the bodybuilding, the training's always been, and we've already established you have this focused perspective, focused purpose, and you're whatever, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 13 weeks out from a show, right? So you're still in this bodybuilding type world. If you weren't able to compete and to double down on that and just had to train for what we all promote, health and fitness, how would you do that?
You know, I'm not great at that. Like, I'm really not. Like, and like I remember when I got out of academia, you know, I moved from Springfield, Massachusetts to New York City for a work change. And I couldn't continue with strongman with that work change. And so then I'm just kind of working out, you know what I mean? Like, and I didn't have like a specific goal to push for. And, you know, I got married maybe a year and a half, 2 years after that. And I mean, I still worked out, but I was just kind of getting fatter and, like, you know, regular. And you know, at a certain point, it was like, I remember with some of the other guys that I worked with, they were starting to like get on my case with like gaining some weight and getting fat. And I was like, man, fuck you guys. Like, you have no idea how lean I've been, like competing in strongman. Like, they're like, nobody cares about that, old man. And it's like, it was kind of enough to get under my skin to just be like, all right, well, I'm going to show you motherfuckers like just how insane I can be. Like, and so, you know, I can do that stuff like the basic, like regular. I mean, I was still training hard, but it's just different. Like when I've got that carrot to be able to chase, you know, my life can take on a meaning around that thing. Like I've been talking about like now I kind of understand Moby Dick. Like, you know, I don't know, like Ahab's insanity. Like I understand it. Like he's gotta have that whale. Otherwise he can't exist. And like part of me dies in some ways if I don't have that white whale to chase. And I don't know what I'll do when I'm too old to be able to have that, you know?
Well, it's an interesting dilemma. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's when I've been fighting for years, I have to find a way to place a carrot, you know, every single year to be able to train for that and just kind of make sure that it's going to create the least amount of destruction in my health and life to be able to do that, because I have not figured out how to just train for health, fitness, and I don't want to say longevity, but a better lifespan, which is kind of fucked up. Yeah. Because that's what we promote you know, that's your clients, right? So we're trying to ask the people that we're helping to do something we don't even know how we would do. You get what you get what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like, I kind of get where they're coming from. Yeah. And it would suck. I don't know if I'd do it, you know, I don't, you know, but we know all the benefits of doing it, but it's fucked up. I mean,
I'm honest with my clients, you know, like I always, you know, they're like, if they say they want to lose weight or something, I'm like, listen, I know how to do that. I can help you do that. Like, I know where the extreme edges of it, you know, and I'll tell you like how to avoid that. I don't think you want the pitfalls of the extreme end of this spectrum, you know? And so, but I'm like, listen, I'm as honest with them as I possibly can be, so they kind of know where I'm coming from. I tell them like, look, I use performance enhancing drugs. I look this way as a result of that. You know, I train like a psychopath. Like if you watch me train, you're going to want to leave. My life is weird. I build it around this, you know, I don't have a lot of social stuff. I don't even want it. Like, I don't actually want to talk to people that much unless they're as crazy as I am in some ways. But it was like, when I put that out there for them, I feel like it's like they get it. And I'm like, look, like and a lot of them are wealthy, you know, I'm like, if I came to you and I told you that I wanted to make $1 billion, you'd laugh at me, right? Like, you know, like you'd realize that I don't know what goes into it. You realize that like the degree to which I'd have to focus my life around it is beyond my conception. It's the same thing for strength and muscle and power over here. Okay. Like you're telling me that you're afraid of looking like a bodybuilder. That's just as comical as me telling you I'm afraid that if I start making money, I'm going to be a billionaire. Okay. So it frames it for them. Where they realize that they have a level of insanity over their world that is a different, but it's similar, where I'm like, listen, all you need, like I can push you in this direction and I'll avoid you making bad choices for exercises and doing too much or too little. Like I'll guide you through we'll thread the needle together for you. Okay. And you won't get hurt and you won't get fucked up. You know, I know where those places are. Been there a million times. So if you like, they get it when I kind of put it into some of their world pieces.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, they get it. The contradiction that I kind of run into is I don't know if I get their position on the fitness part. Yeah. Because that would be akin to something that I do in my life that I really don't give a fuck about, but I have to do. Exactly. I mean, I don't look forward to that. You know, it's just the discipline just makes me do whatever that is, work shit that I have to do. That's just admin and stuff like that.
Right.
Cause that's kind of this training is to them what this shitty admin is to us.
Sure.
And sometimes I think we forget that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, especially when they have their reasons why they can't do X, Y, and Z. I can give you a lot of reasons why I procrastinate, you know, answering stupid emails I don't want to answer. You know what I'm,
100%.
you know, so it's,
I use the accountant discussion with it. Like I can't do my taxes on my own. Like I'm sure I could if but I'm not going to. Like it's the last thing I want to do. So I have to go to the accountant. I have to sacrifice that. I got to pay this guy. He's got to take care of it. Like I'm your accountant for your body. Okay. And generally you got to do things that are a little bit harder than what you want. And I'm going to push you to do things that are a little bit harder than what you want, but they're still like, they're nowhere near the kind of hard shit that would actually transform you, but potentially fuck you up.
I'm going to say something really fucked up right now because it just came to my mind. And we're not going to go hire an accountant that is doing things that are really fucking borderline being illegal to be able to get thrown in fucking jail.
Yeah.
And, you know, like scamming shit and people like that. So you get where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Where I think I might want to take that back and not actually say it, because if we're using PEDs and you're on this path super hard, isn't that kind of like the accountant?
It's a little bit like it.
Fucked up.
But I would say, like, if that accountant, if they told you, like, listen, like in my own world, like I'm as crooked as they come and I have scammed things, but I also know the regular way and I know where the line is between those places, and I'm going to keep you on this line over here. I almost trust that guy more. You know what I mean?
I would. That's a good way to look at it.
So it's like, and that's kind of what I'm telling him is, it's like, I know the most fucked up things possible, man. Like, you know, like I'm cooking bathtub Trent over here.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that with you. Okay. Like we don't have to measure your food necessarily. Like we're going to take an easy approach here. There's so much low hanging fruit. Like I'm aware of all of the really deep places to go. And like, you just need to get nudged a little bit. Like you'll be fine over here.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think about like different vehicles too. You know, like powerlifting sprinters, they're like, you know, kind of your tractor pull and your drag cars. Like they're specialized vehicles, but like you send a drag car down the quarter mile, it basically tears itself apart. You know, it needs to be like put back together again by a specialized team. Same thing, the tractor pull, like those big monster things, like they're tearing themselves apart at the seams every run that they take. Versus, you know, regular people, when they go to work out, it's like a Toyota Prius going down a quarter mile. Okay. It maxes itself out down that quarter mile. It could do it again right now. Like it can kind of keep doing it. But what I usually say is like, if you know that a person is kind of a regular vehicle, you know, they're like a Buick or something like that. The big thing is don't try to drive it like it's a Lamborghini, or don't try to drive it like it's like a dune racing truck or something like that. Because if you do that, you're going to look like an asshole. Like nobody looks more stupid than someone taking a mid-sized sedan and doing donuts in the parking lot with it, or trying to jump it, or doing something weird. Drive it normal. Okay. Put your blinker on when you're going to change lanes. Like, and that to me is personal training. Just normal. Whatever the most normal shit is, you go to the gym, you kind of do, this goes to what we were talking about before, the Will Smith for rap sort of a thing. Just basic 2 to 3 sets per exercise, kind of maybe touching close to failure, you know, mostly full body things. The more that it starts to look like an exotic training session that might be for an athlete, the more I'm really questioning your personal training.
With the clients that you work with, how much of them are just Gen Pop normal?
All of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Manhattan's not a place with a lot of athletes, you know, it's just people that are usually pretty successful financially, but a lot of times they're working in jobs where it's like, they're just brainiacs, but I feel like I'm stuck in this cosmic game of all the kids I used to hit with the dodgeball in the head. Now I'm stuck with them again, but I have to teach them how to exercise. And it's like, oh man, how did I get stuck with you guys again here? But they're coming to me because they're bad at exercise.
Yes, I spent close to a decade training that specific demographic.
Yeah.
And it's when you're talking about the personal training, just to lean into that a little bit, the exotic exercises and all the shit that they're kind of exposed to, they don't need, right?
Right.
I had so many clients that would only have one session booked per week. And is that going to help? Probably not a whole fucking lot, but it might lead to 2 6 months later or a year later. You know, it's this long game,
Right.
because they come in and it's hard enough just to get them to focus on the training, because they still, especially if it's midday, you know, if it's early morning, it's great as long as you can get up fucking early,
Right.
because they want to get up early,
Right.
like real early. And but midday, man, their brain is like all over the place, and you're just trying to get them to lay down and focus on doing a fucking leg press or whatever it's going to be. And but they're maybe not so much now. Actually, you can answer this for me. My clients back then were just bombarded with fitness information because of what would be on the news or in the paper or in one of the magazines that they would read, where I don't know, because magazines aren't around, the paper's around, the news really doesn't talk about this shit anymore. So the only way they would be exposed to it would be social media, which they're probably not getting that shit on their feeds.
Right.
So are they getting the dogmatic crap information?
They're not, but their trainers probably are. And like, at least,
but they're not coming to you asking about it.
No, but like in Manhattan, it's like, it's like I'll be in a gym, and then there's like 80 million other random trainers doing whatever the hell insanity they're doing. And, you know, clients are looking around and seeing something cool over there. They don't know what it is, but it looks cool, versus we're just doing this very basic thing that we've been doing for the last 8 weeks, and they're seeing some. So it's more that like, I think that it's in the environment that they go to and what other people are being made to do by their trainers. And I've seen some like really weird shit in Manhattan. Like,
no, but that's kind of better than what I had to deal with, because I had to keep up with all the other shit, because I knew I was going to get asked about it. You know, because it was whatever was on morning fucking news or whatever it was. And I didn't want to be ignorant, you know, because sometimes it was shit you didn't know about. It's like, what the fuck is that? You know, and where if you can see it, you kind of already know to be able to address it, which is really interesting for me to think about, because we think of this because we're in the space, you know, as being so much bigger and so much global, and it is growing tremendously, and more people care about their health than they ever have, and so forth. But we worry about all the misinformation, or whatever we want to call it, that gets out there. But the people that we're talking about, they're not being exposed to it.
Yeah.
Which is actually a good thing.
It is funny how, like, you know, every person's world is like cultivated into like their own weird algorithm now. So it's, in some ways they aren't getting that. You know, I to me, it's always just an effort game with personal training. Like, it usually just comes down to like dealing with their mind and gradually exposing them to what effort feels like. And that's, I've actually found that's where technology is helpful. You know, where if I can show them their bar speed across a set, and, you know, it's like, hey, look, you started your set over here and you were moving it at 1.1 meters per second, and you stopped over here and you were at 0.95 meters per second. Like, you didn't need to stop there. And they're like, oh, okay. Like, and then you can show them, like, from a numbers perspective, they almost need to learn what something feels like through numbers. And that to me has been a really big piece in the biggest part of it, which is just like getting this person to have the confidence to put enough effort into a set to where the set might actually do something. And then having them make that the new normal. And now that that's the new normal, we can actually start like training and putting a program together.
I wanted to talk about the mental aspect of training. And after talking to you, I'm going to kind of take this a little bit different direction with this, because it's as I was telling you beforehand, when we're looking at the strength sports and we're looking at the mental aspect, there's like two sides, you know, learn how to meditate and take pre-workout and hit it smalls. And there's kind of like nothing in the middle. But the thing I want to kind of focus on is from an early age, you've had this, for lack of a better word, this all in mentality. Like, I'm doing this, I'm going fucking hard in the paint, I'm staying in this. And I'm sure, because I'm the same way. So it's a lot of shit goes sideways when you're like that, right? But when you're like that for decades, you learn that, I believe, and I'm sure you agree because you're still there, you need that. You have to have that. This is going to fucking happen no matter what.
Right.
But I'm going to make this happen.
Yep.
Right. But you got to learn how to you need to learn how to take all the other things that are outside of that and learn how to cultivate all of it to help that. Right. Where the younger me wouldn't take all that to cultivate it. I just fucking eliminated it all.
Yeah.
And then just put it all in here. But it ended up hurting what that actually could have been.
Sure.
Right. So that's my way to kind of explain this, because this gets dicey, because people will say you don't want to go all in, you don't want to focus and all this other kind of stuff because it's so destructive and all this. And I'm like, motherfucker, nobody's ever achieved anything that doesn't do that. The difference is some people learn how to use all those other factors selfishly, right, to be able to help benefit them to become better, sleeping better, you know, all these other variables that kind of pull in it that we all learn too late. You know, drugs can kind of help you learn those too late because they buffer a lot of that other kind of stuff. But if you learn it sooner, then I believe you're going to be able to extend your peak competitive years, right? Because it's all going to, at some point, it's all going to go down. Right. We haven't solved that problem yet. I mean, you know, and we never will, no matter what anybody says. You know, there's a lot of shit to turn around to change biological aging. They'll say they can, but people still fucking die. Right. Another little random mind. Some of the healthiest 80-year-olds I know have never trained in their entire fucking life. Right. So another contradiction in the world that we all live in. You know, all the ones that I know that trained a lot fucking died sooner. Right. So let's just put that, but we live in this weird world where people do crazy shit. So how have you navigated that space? I want to take a second to throw a quick shout out to my friends over at Massonomics. They have some of the greatest t-shirts. Their memes are incredible. Their YouTube gym tours are great. These drink spotter things, I got about 7 of them out here. Snap them on power racks, put smelling salts in it, drinks. I think they hold up to 10 pounds, or they have different sizes of these. These are great. They made coasters out of stall mats, which is amazing. But what I really wanted to let you know is to go check out gymradar.com. They launched a website that's going to help people find home gyms that they can train at, and to be able to put your own home gym on there and not only be able to find where it is, but see what they actually have. And it's also great for product reviews because people are putting the products that they have in this Gym Radar. Just go check it out. It's great. So it's www.gymradar.com. And also check out Massonomics. Check out their website, check out their Instagram. The memes are great. And check out their YouTube. Right? Because as you're younger, I'm sure you're told you can't keep doing, you got to be well-rounded, whatever people want to say, be balanced and all the other kind of shit. And I'm like, nobody's fucking balanced. You know, it's figuring that out. I guess, have you figured it out, right? Which you have, because you wouldn't have a PhD. You wouldn't be training clients. You wouldn't have, you know, the success you've had in the field. You'd just be really good at whatever sport you were, right? You have, like, there is like a B plan.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, like, I think, I will get messages from people sometimes and they're like, how do I, you know, be you or something like that, more or less. Like, they'll ask me, like, what was your path to get where you are? And like, how could I do something similar? And I'm like, Jesus, I don't know. Like my path is I don't even understand it in some ways. Like I don't make sense, I don't think. If I tried to describe myself to you, it wouldn't make sense. And like I've historically throughout my entire life, it's been a rise and a explosion to a collapse. And then a rise a little higher to another explosion to a collapse. And even now, like, I finished a divorce in the last year, and like that's probably the hardest thing I've ever dealt with my entire life. And my actions are what caused it. And so, now I'm dealing with the reality of like life after that and trying to be a parent in a non-bound family situation. And in a lot of ways, like as my professional, like my marriage basically was ending, the job that I was at for a while was ending, like a lot of relationships, that all of it at the same time, just boof, with COVID shit happening. And like, it was like all of the big stressors that as a man, like at the same time. And so I'm kind of in the process of like trying to put it back together again. And it's like I feel like I've done this so many goddamn times. Like, maybe this time's gonna be the one that's the one that really puts it together in the right way. I think that and like I said, like the divorce is the hardest thing I've ever dealt with in my life. And like the degree to which it's almost like nothing fucking matters, it feels like is like an overwhelming kind of feeling. Like, okay, I could put myself together again, but for what? Like, what the fuck? And so I'm trying to work my way through that. But the bodybuilding has been really helpful because it's put a lot of guardrails on things. It's almost like I care so much about the numbers and like the process that I am going to go to bed on time. Like I am going to cook food for myself. I am going to show up and train because the numbers drive me like a lunatic towards things. It's almost like I have parameters in the weight gaining period. It's supposed to be 1 to 2 pounds per week, every week. I'm going to get that shit done. Right now it should be 1 to 2 pounds of loss per week, every week. And like, I'm going to get that done. But it really is like, I know if I get a bad night's sleep, that's not helping. I know that if I'm missing meals or, eating too much or whatever, that's not helping. And so a lot of these things from a big picture perspective, like I chose this pretty specifically because it really puts me on rails for life right now. Like I won't deviate because I care too much about ensuring the goal. And so as a parent too, it actually has been really helpful because it's like, I'm going to cook food for me and my son, always breakfast, always this meal, always dinner. Like we're on a pretty good schedule. Like I take him out and we're active together, partly because I need that activity and those steps and that stuff for my own stuff, but I know it's helpful for him. So this one was a better thought through specific goal than previous renditions were. Like the strongman one completely fucked up my career as a professor. completely fucked that up. And I knew that if I got into it, it was going to be an all-consuming thing. And I remember some of the students there, they're already into strongman. They're like, dude, you got to come and train. You're going to love this. And I was like, yeah, and that's going to be the problem. Okay. But they got me there and I tried the stuff and they were like, oh, you could already qualify for nationals. And it was like, yeah, and if I diet, I can make this weight. And like, and then it was all over, and it just,
how did it fuck up your career as a professor?
Well, because then all of a sudden I'm coaching the team and like this was an unsanctioned team at the school. And now the department is looking at me like, why are you doing this with these students? And like, it was just like nobody understood it. And then I'm paying more attention to training and dieting and coaching than I am to
your job.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was doing the research and the teaching, but I wasn't even like going to meetings and shit like that. So yeah, it was like, and then they're just like, you're a fucking weirdo or something like that. And it's like, yeah, but not in the way that you think. Okay. Like I'm not doing anything strange with the students. We're just training and competing and traveling and like, but all of a sudden I've got this army of 40 kids on a team, okay, like out of nowhere. And, Springfield College is like a place where the professors are coaches, like the football coach teaches classes, every coach, but you go to the lunchroom and it's the football team sitting with the coaches eating. It's the, baseball. Now all of a sudden we have iron sports and they're sitting and eating with me and we've got 40 of them. And it was like, who is this guy doing this unsanctioned thing? But all of a sudden we're the best team on campus. We've got guys competing and winning national championships, going to world championships, like on trajectory to world's strongest man. And it was like, they just didn't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm. What did you take from all of it?
Boy, that's a great question. A lot of bitterness about it because I put my heart and soul into it. And it was the first time I failed at something as like a sober, rational adult, and I realized like some of my blind spots of like, I might not be on drugs, but I'm still a little crazy, and I did fuck up. I did. Like, I should have seen the writing on the wall here. And I am a little out of control and brazen and cocky. And like, I probably did spit in their face in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on me. And like, I got to own that. And, it's tough for me. Like, I get in a situation where if like I'm working with somebody over me and I don't respect them, I'm a nightmare in those kinds of situations. And I try to keep my mouth shut. I've learned to try to keep my mouth shut in those situations, but it usually leaks out over time. I'm real bad at like hiding how I feel
Mm-hmm.
and like keeping my mouth shut when it's like, over enough time. So, yeah, I haven't figured it out. I know that I've got this sort of extreme personality. I know that I've got this kind of insatiable hole that like I tend to fill with big goals and pushing for something. And I know that I can be a real difficult person in a workplace. Like I'm good if I'm in charge. Like, but it's like, you have to leave me alone and let me do it exactly how I want to do it. And I usually tell people, I'm like, I had some really interesting conversations, like when I first got to New York and I was part of this big project that wanted to be a mega gym sort of a thing. And I had this COO that like, I just thought the guy was a fucking clown. And like, he had been like an Equinox guy. And I'm like, you're trying to tell me how to be the director of education? Like, shut the fuck up, dude. Like, you're a fucking little jerk. Like, and I remember telling him like, listen, I know you want to tell me how to do my job. I'm going to kill you. Literally, I will fucking kill you if you continue to try to tell me how to do my job. I can't help it. Like, you're going to drive me crazy. If you literally just shut the fuck up and leave me alone and let me do it, you're going to get the best product you've ever seen in your life, something you can't even imagine. Can you shut the fuck up and never talk to me and never ask me to come to a meeting and never bother me? Can you do that? Because I don't ever need to talk to you. I don't ever need to know what you're up to. Like, but if you trust me, I'll do it. The whole project went under. We didn't get to actually test that out. But, it's, I do know that I can be beyond difficult. And so I don't like I have a feeling it might just continue to be this sort of replay of that. And I don't know if it ever won't be. I think it's just more that I got to be in a good position with other people that like, I respect and that can also just understand that I might go off the rails. And it's like, that just means that I'm that person that can go off the rails, like it's so.
Did you have any other topics you wanted to talk about I didn't bring up?
I don't think so, man. I think that the stuff we got into was awesome, and like I feel pretty complete with it.
How can people, what's the best way they can reach you, get in contact with you?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram's easy. Like, I don't use the other platforms really. You know, everything goes to my phone, so it's like all in one place. So if people send me a DM through Instagram, then we can take it to email or text or whatever from there. But that's the easiest one.
Outside of this show coming up, what are you working on this year?
Yeah. I've been doing some work with over in Israel with some of their defense teams. You know, I like working with military groups. You know, I enjoy the personalities with that stuff, and like organizing their training. You know, a lot of times they're great with their tactical ops, but their training methodology is crazy, and like trying to get them to understand like the level of tightness that you put into your tactical. If you do that with your fitness, like you're gonna really dovetail that together nicely. Um, so I'm working with some of that. I've got some seminars that I teach. You know, I've got one coming up in LA on the 16th and 17th. That's the resistance patterns course that I teach, which is just all things lifting weights. I've got some ones that are set up for the fall when I get done with bodybuilding prep. I'm going to be going to Australia and Singapore at the end of September, and then I'm supposed to have some in the Czech Republic and the country of Jordan in like the November time period. So I've got a lot of international education stuff happening right now.
All right. Well, thank you for coming out. This was great talking to you.
Thank you.
We're done.